You stand at the edge of a battlefield most men never see, not one of steel and blood, but of potential unrealized. The enemy is not outside, it hides in the chaos of modern learning, the scattered attention, the 100 half-learned skills that litter your past like broken weapons. You have tried before, you have failed before, but you have never fought with the precision of a samurai's doctrine. In the year 1632, a swordsman named Yagyu Munenori served the Tokugawa shogunate. He did not teach technique alone, he taught transformation. His manual, the Heiho Kadensho, laid bare a truth that would ripple through martial arts for 4 centuries. Mastery is not accumulation, but evolution through distinct stages. The Japanese named this progression Shu-Ha-Ri, 3 syllables that contain the entire architecture of human excellence. Shu means to obey, to protect the form. Ha means to break, to detach from doctrine. Ri means to transcend, to become the principle itself. This is not philosophy for scrolls and temple walls. This is combat instruction for the transformation of self. Modern productivity culture has poisoned your understanding of skill. It sells you 10,000-hour myths and talent fallacies, keeps you trapped in the beginner's loop where effort feels like progress but yields no power. You collect courses like a hoarder collects trash. You start strong, fade fast, and wonder why nothing sticks. The problem is not your discipline. The problem is you are building without a foundation, innovating before you can imitate, seeking freedom before you have accepted constraint. You are a samurai swinging wildly in the dark, never taught the kata that makes every movement inevitable. Shu-Ha-Ri emerged from the crucible of kenjutsu, the art of the sword, where a single mistake meant death. When a student entered the dojo of Ito-Ryu or Yagyu Shinkage-Ryu, he did not choose his path. The Ryu, the school, chose him. He bowed, he listened. He repeated the same cut for months until his shoulders burned and his hands bled through the wrappings. This was not hazing. This was the erasure of ego, the installation of correct pattern into muscle and mind. The teachers knew what you have forgotten. Freedom is not the absence of structure, but its mastery. A river without banks is not free. It is a swamp. The West worships innovation, celebrates the rebel, the disruptor, the genius who breaks all rules. But the samurai understood that rebellion without foundation is merely chaos cosplaying as creativity. Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary Ronin who killed over 60 men in duels and died undefeated in 1645, spent his youth mastering the orthodoxy of his father's style before he ever modified a stance. He learned Shu so completely that Ha became inevitable, and Ri became his legend. You do not get to skip steps on the path. The shortcut is the trap. Shu-Ha-Ri is not a timeline, it is a transformation. You do not graduate from one stage by calendar days, but by the depth of internalization. The beginner sees 1,000 techniques, the intermediate sees principles, the master sees nothing. He simply acts, and the action is correct because he has become the art itself. This is what 90 days can forge if you follow the ancient method without compromise. Not mastery in the sense of perfection, but mastery in the sense of ownership. The skill becomes part of your body, your instinct, your identity. You do not do the thing, you are the thing. The modern world will tell you this is too rigid, too old-fashioned, that learning should be fun and flexible and self-directed. These are the words of those who have mastered nothing. The dojo was never meant to be comfortable. Comfort is the assassin of transformation. You are not here to feel good about yourself. You are here to become dangerous, to acquire capability that makes you unbreakable. The samurai did not train for self-esteem. He trained because his life and the lives of those he protected depended on his capacity to execute flawlessly under pressure. Your life may not hang by a sword's edge, but your potential does. Every day you delay true mastery is a day the enemy, mediocrity, controls your territory. Shu-Ha-Ri survived 400 years because it mirrors the way human beings actually learn, not the way we wish we learned. It respects the tyranny of fundamentals. It honors the necessity of rebellion. It promises the ultimate reward, to move through the world with such skill that technique disappears and only essence remains. You are about to walk the path the warriors walked, not as a scholar studying history, but as a practitioner claiming inheritance. Shu is the death of your preferences. When the student entered the compound of the Yagyu dojo in Edo period Japan, he surrendered his assumptions at the gate. The master demonstrated a single cut, the kesagiri, diagonal from shoulder to hip, and the student repeated it. 1,000 times, 2,000, the blade's angle, the hip rotation, the breath timing, all prescribed, all absolute. The student did not ask why. He did not suggest improvements. He protected the form as if his life depended on perfect transmission, because in the world of live blades, it did. This is Shu, the stage of obedience, not the obedience of the broken, but the obedience of the intelligent warrior, who understands that mastery begins with perfect imitation. You select a teacher, a system, a method that has produced results in others, and you follow it with religious precision. You do not mix systems. You do not innovate. You do not interpret. Interpretation is the privilege of the master, and you are not yet worthy. Your ego will scream against this. It will tell you that you are special, that your situation is different, that you have insights the teacher lacks. Silence that voice. It is the enemy wearing your face. In 1760, Takuan Soho wrote that the beginner's mind must be like a clear mirror. It reflects perfectly because it holds nothing of its own. The moment you add your own ideas to the form, you cloud the mirror. You are no longer learning the technique. You are learning your distorted version of it, and distortion compounds. After 90 days of distorted practice, you have mastered nothing but your own delusion. The samurai schools enforced kata for this reason, prearranged forms that allowed no deviation. The student's body learned the geometry of violence before his mind could interfere with preference or creativity. What does this mean for you, learning a language, a trade, a physical discipline in the modern age? It means you find the proven method and you execute it exactly. If you are learning a skill, you locate the practitioner whose results you want, and you study their process, not their results. You do not cherry-pick techniques from 5 different teachers. You do not skip the boring drills because they feel unproductive. The drill is the delivery system for unconscious competence. Repetition is not mindless. It is the carving of neural pathways deep enough that execution becomes automatic. Consider the calligrapher's apprentice in feudal Japan, grinding ink for 3 years before he ever held a brush to paper. Was this waste? No. In the grinding, he learned pressure, consistency, patience, respect for materials. When he finally touched brush to rice paper, his hand already understood discipline. The form protected him from the chaos of infinite possibility. Constraints are not prison bars. They are the scaffolding that lets you build upward. Your first 30 days live entirely in Shu. You accept that you know nothing. You study the master's technique through video, text, demonstration, whatever medium delivers the purest transmission. You practice daily, same time, same place, same sequence. You track adherence, not results. Results are none of your business yet. Your only job is fidelity to form. When frustration rises, when the technique feels mechanical and lifeless, you remember the swordsman bleeding through his wrappings. He was not building comfort, he was building capacity. The mistakes you will make in Shu are predictable, starting before you have studied, modifying before you have mastered, quitting before you have transformed. All 3 are fatal. The warrior who abandons kata because it feels restrictive is the warrior who dies in his first real encounter. The form is not the enemy of your expression, it is the foundation beneath it. You cannot break rules you have not learned. You cannot transcend what you have not embodied. Shu demands humility, repetition, and faith that the method works even when you cannot yet see how. It is the least glamorous stage and the most essential. Without it, everything that follows is performance art, not power. You bow to the form, you protect it, you let it reshape you from the inside. Only then does the second gate open. Ha arrives not when the calendar permits, but when the form has saturated your bones. You have repeated the technique so many thousands of times that your body executes without thought. The kesagiri cut no longer requires your attention. Your shoulder drops, your hip turns, the blade falls along the correct line as naturally as breathing. Only now, In this moment of unconscious competence, does doubt become useful? The master demonstrated one method, but your arms are longer. Your opponent stands closer. The terrain slopes. Suddenly, the question is no longer whether you can perform the technique, but whether you should. This is Ha, the stage of detachment, of conscious breakage. The character itself means to break, to tear away, and that is precisely what you do. You separate yourself from the teacher's shadow, not in rebellion, but in adaptation. Takuan Soho described this as the moment when the swordsman stops copying and starts responding. The difference is subtle but absolute. Copying is mechanical, responding is alive. You have internalized the principles so deeply that you can now bend the techniques to serve those principles rather than enslave yourself to their form. In 1643, Miyamoto Musashi fought Sasaki Kojiro on the shores of Ganryu Island. Kojiro was famous for his Tsubame Gaishi, the swallow counter, a technique of devastating speed and precision. Musashi had studied conventional timing his entire youth, but on that beach he arrived late deliberately, carved his oar into a wooden sword longer than any orthodox blade, and struck from a distance Kojiro's training had never anticipated. Musashi did not abandon his foundation. He expanded beyond it. That is Ha. He understood principles of timing, distance, and psychological warfare so completely that he could violate every formal rule and still execute perfect strategy. Your second 30 days live in this territory of calibration. You have the foundation. Now you test it against reality. You take the language drills and apply them to actual conversation where people speak faster, use slang, ignore grammar. You take the business framework and adapt it to your specific market, your resources, your constraints. The form begins to morph, not because you are careless, but because you are awake. You notice where the technique fails. You notice where your unique circumstances demand modification, and you modify with precision, not caprice. The danger of Ha is premature arrival. The student who skips Shu and leaps directly to Ha is not adapting, he is guessing. He has no foundation to break from, so his innovations are random, unrepeatable, fragile. True Ha requires you to know the rules so intimately that you can predict exactly what will happen when you violate them. The jazz musician who improvises brilliantly has first mastered scales so completely he no longer thinks about them. His improvisation is not chaos. It is structured freedom, and the structure is invisible because it has become his nature. You will know you have entered Ha when practice shifts from repetition to experimentation. You are no longer asking, "Am I doing this correctly?" You are asking, "What happens if I do this differently?" You study variations. You spar with complexity. You seek out challenges that the basic form cannot handle, and you discover how to extend the principles into new territory. The teacher's voice is still in your head, but now you argue with it, respectfully, testing its boundaries. Some of his prohibitions, you discover, were merely preferences. Others were weight-bearing walls. Remove them and everything collapses. Ha teaches you to distinguish between the two. This stage feels like liberation, and it is, but it is not the final gate. You are still thinking, still choosing, still aware of technique as separate from self. One transformation remains. Ri is the vanishing of method. The swordsman no longer draws his blade. The blade draws itself. The calligrapher no longer paints characters. His hand moves and beauty appears. This is not metaphor. This is the neurological reality of skill so deeply encoded that conscious thought becomes interference. The technique has dissolved into instinct, and instinct has dissolved into identity. You do not perform the skill. You are the skill embodied. In 1645, Miyamoto Musashi retreated to Reigando Cave on Mount Iwado to write the Gorin no Sho, the Book of Five Rings. He had spent 60 years mastering the sword, but in that cave he wrote almost nothing about technique. He wrote about water, fire, wind, void. He wrote about principles that transcend weapons, transcend combat, transcend even the human condition. He had reached Rai. The specific forms of Niten Ichi-ryu, his two-sword style, no longer mattered to him because he had become the principle beneath all forms. He could pick up any weapon, face any situation, and respond correctly, because correctness was no longer a decision, it was his nature. This is what the final 30 days forge. You have mastered the form in Shu. You have adapted it in Ha. Now in Ri, you forget it entirely, not because you have abandoned it, but because you have absorbed it so completely that it operates below consciousness. The pianist no longer thinks about finger position, music flows. The surgeon no longer thinks about incision depth, healing happens. The warrior no longer thinks about stance, he moves, and the movement is perfect because imperfection has been trained out of existence. Takuan Soho called this mushin, no mind, the state where thought does not interrupt action. Western psychology would later name it flow, but the samurai understood it 3 centuries earlier with greater precision. Mushin is not the absence of mind, but the presence of mind so total that it divides itself across every aspect of performance simultaneously. You are hyper-aware and completely unself-conscious at the same time. The beginner must focus on his grip. The master's grip is correct before he notices he is holding the sword. You will recognize Rai not by what you can do, but by what you no longer think about. The language you are learning stops being translated in your head. You think in it directly. The physical skill stops feeling like coordination. Your body simply knows. The creative work stops being a process you follow. It becomes expression you release. You have crossed from practitioner to artist, from student to master, from one who has the skill to one who is the skill. But understand this, Ri is not permanent enlightenment. It is a state you can enter when conditions align. Sufficient practice, proper focus, absence of interference. The master still drills basics. Musashi still practiced subri, basic cuts, until the week he died. Ri does not mean you transcend practice. It means practice becomes meditation, maintenance of the formless form. You return to Shu again and again, not as a beginner, but as a master, checking his foundation, ensuring no cracks have formed. The ancient Zen saying captures this. Before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. The actions remain identical. What changes is the one performing them. You are no longer learning the skill. You are no longer even practicing the skill. You are simply being, and the skill expresses through you as naturally as breath. This is the promise waiting at the end of 90 days of uncompromising devotion, not perfection, but integration. Not mastery over the skill, but mastery as the skill. The map is drawn. Now you walk the territory. 90 days is not arbitrary. It is the precise duration in which a human being can sustain focused intensity before old patterns calcify into permanence or new patterns collapse into abandonment. The samurai understood campaigns. They understood that transformation requires declaration, execution, and closure. You do not stumble into mastery, you siege it. Days 1 through 30 belong entirely to Shu. You select your skill and your singular source. One teacher, one method, one sequence. You study the demonstration until you can visualize it perfectly with closed eyes. Then, you practice daily, minimum 1 hour, same environment, same time. The consistency is not convenience, it is ritual. Ritual bypasses negotiation. Your discipline should never be a morning debate. You train at 6 because you train at 6, the way a temple bell rings because it is time, not because it feels inspired. Document every session, not your feelings, not your progress, your adherence. Did you complete the prescribed repetitions? Did you maintain the correct form? Yes or no? The binary is crucial. Improvement is invisible day to day. Adherence is measurable immediately. You are building the foundation beneath conscious awareness. Your body is learning while your mind protests. Let it protest. Continue anyway. By day 30, the technique should feel mechanical but flawless. You are a machine executing code. That is correct. You are not yet an artist. You are not supposed to be. Days 31 through 60 transition into Ha. Now you introduce variables. Practice the skill under different conditions, different contexts, different pressures. If you are learning language, you stop drilling grammar and start conversing with native speakers who will shatter your careful constructions. If you are learning a physical skill, you spar, you compete, you test it against resistance that does not cooperate. The form will fail in small ways. Catalog every failure. Each one teaches you where the principle bends and where it breaks. This is where most men quit. The beginner's high has faded. The intermediate plateau is barren and brutal. You are no longer impressed with yourself, but you are not yet impressive to others. This is the valley where warriors are sorted from pretenders. The samurai had a term, shugyo, austere training, the deliberate embrace of hardship as refinement. You do not avoid difficulty in this phase, you seek it. Every failure is data, every adaptation is evolution. By day 60, you should be able to perform the skill in imperfect conditions and adjust in real time. You are no longer following the map, you are reading the terrain. Days 61 through 90 are emergence. You stop analyzing, you increase volume and decrease conscious effort. You practice until thinking becomes interference, until your body anticipates before your mind instructs. You enter sessions with no agenda except presence. You are no longer building the skill, you are inhabiting it. Flow states become frequent, time distorts. Effort feels effortless, not because it is easy, but because resistance has been trained out of the system. On day 90, you do not celebrate completion, you assess integration. Can you execute the skill without preparation, without ideal conditions, without self-consciousness? If yes, you have earned the foundation. If no, you identify the gap and you repeat the cycle. Mastery is not a destination, it is a territory you occupy and defend. The ancient warriors did not train for tournament glory. They trained because incompetence was death. You may not face a blade, but you face something worse, a life half-lived, potential abandoned, the slow rot of mediocrity. Shu-Ha-Ri is your declaration of war against that fate. 90 days, one skill, total devotion. The path is drawn. Walk it like your life depends on what waits at the end. Because it does.